the camera is able to look down on the game table, not because the game table is lower than normal height for a table, but because the camera is suspended, clamped to an overhead track lighting system. So the distance between the camera to the surface of the table is exactly perfect for the aspect ratio of the camera, which is landscape. And of course, as you can see, we have moved almost entirely over to a 4 by 3 foot table. Why? So that essentially in the future, if we wanted to have a 6 by 4 table, we just put two of these together and we have a 6 by 4 table. And yet, the vast majority of times, we have a 4 by 3 table like this, and that is going to be our standard going forward. 3 by 3, not enough. It was working out fine, and 2 by 2 was for very precise skirmish action, but again, not worth it. You might as well use a 4 by 3, just use a portion of it, and zoom in as necessary for broadcast purposes. But a 4 by 3 table provides a lot of space to put stuff around if you're not using the whole length of it, the whole size of it. You can establish areas where you can put stuff to hold, to just store. And it makes it easier to have all that space available. But in a normal tactical combat situation right here, we have a 4 by 3 game table. And of course, as you can see, it's a jumble of terrain. Why? Because we just threw the stuff out there and we're about to rearrange it. You'll also see bottom left hand corner as it is right now. We have three 3D printed bridges, but the caveat to these is that in order to print these things faster than would normally be the amount of time to print them, we had to manipulate the 3D file so that just the walls of the bridge were printed. The rest of it was unnecessary. There wasn't any reason to print the surface road of the bridge, so all we needed to do was print the walls, and for the road itself and between those walls, just use a piece of cardboard. And we've got that, of course, coated and finished, painted, and ready to go. So it's long-lasting. But there was no reason to spend the time printing the road of the bridge. It just wasn't necessary because cardboard is so much easier to use and allows for a different arc, if you will, on the bridge than you might be confined to if it was in the file. So in this way, the key, the secret, if you will, to terrain printing or maybe anything in 3D printing is not to have to think that the whole object must be printed on the printer, be it resin or filament, doesn't matter. The whole object doesn't need to be printed, just those parts that are usually the most difficult to find or make on your own, in this case the wall of the bridge. So what I was saying was that we took the file and we dropped the Z-axis in the program, and we're able and configured the wall or of the bridge to just print the wall. So we buried it, if you will. We buried the image below the platen in the software that represents the platen of the printer until we showed just the wall of the bridge, and we printed just the wall. And then we just did that a couple of times until we had enough walls that we put together between a piece of cardboard. It's as simple as that. And of course, it's not just flimsy cardboard. It's pretty good cardboard. It's not matte board. It's not photo matte board. It's got to be a little more flexible than that. So it's the type of cardboard that you might see, say, on a cereal box. All right, so that kind of cardboard. So we took that in between the two walls and we made a bridge. And that is a great, fast, yet sturdy and acceptable bridge, which doesn't cost so much of the plastic filament to be needed. Okay, and then we were also wanting to point out the brown areas that you see right here now. These are the fields that we printed. These are Foamies, and we've drawn hex grids on them so that we can position these anywhere we want to have little different color to the battlefield. And so that's why that is. We have some fuzzy material as well, which we've also had we've created a template that we can spray paint through onto the fabric. And that is pretty cool. That allows us to get a hex grid onto a fuzzy fabric. Not too fuzzy, but it looks something like a wheat field. And also, we have our Roman 3D printed temple, because we basically are in the Roman era right now. We wanted something out there that looks like it's some kind of a typical for the era. In the region, you might have these temples scattered throughout the countryside for various reasons of worship. And basically, that's what that kind of represents. So that's what that is. And then we have our old paper-cut cornfields, which will be going away because we've since discovered a 3D printed provider who will do them for us. We don't actually have the ability of doing resin printing. We have an FDA printer. We have a filament printer. And what we've discovered is a company, Spira, actually, who will do cornfields for us, and they're fantastic. So we'll be getting those. So these little guys will go away. But, you know, right now, we still have them, so we'll use them. Again, this is our audio installation foam. We've painted it light green, so they look something like a forest. And because you can cut it with the scissors, we can cut various shapes. And lastly, we have our terraced Foamies hills that we wanted to have a slope of some kind, the impression of a slope at least. And our top is a 2.5x. And then we radiate outward larger and larger and larger until we get as many layers as we want. These are 6 millimeter thick, which are not that easy to find. You can't just get on the street and get them. You actually have to order these. And then we layered them on top of each other and just simply use wood glue to hold the sheets together. And if they need to be spray painted, then we spray paint. We have white, and I think brown was available, or tan was available. So tan seems to be the more likely solution. White, when it's painted, may give a color, as you can see the difference in the color here. One is tan versus one which was white and we painted. Anyway, so that's how those hills are being made. And we'll come back in a few minutes and we'll start putting down the rivers and get a nice little potential scenario going here. We'll see how that works. Okay, so we are back and we are going to put down this terrain in an appropriate method. First, what we're going to do is kind of clear everything away. And the reason for that is by clearing everything away, we get a better sense of what our space is. And right now, we don't want to clutter it too much. So what we'll actually do is we'll take away these fields, because by clearing this terrain, we're getting an idea of the space that we can utilize. And what this is a way to, let's just pull all this stuff off. As you can see, it's completely easy to remove. You don't have to worry about anything. You can just throw it around. All these little trees and stuff can just be tossed. There's no worries. It's fast and easy. And that is the whole point, because we want to be able to set up and broadcast as quickly as possible. Now, what about the hills? I don't know. There's no way to know. We can look at some of these rivers that we have in stock of Foamies. The blue Foamies. This gives us an idea what can be done. And then the question is, when you put these kinds of things down, you have to say to yourself, well, first of all, unfortunately, there's 2 different brands here, maybe 3. As you can see, there's different colors. So that's the problem. When you go to find the colors that you need, you want to have them all to be the same color, because it looks obvious on the computer screen. For instance, that looks like it's all one color. This looks like it's an older purchase. These colors are the same. I don't know what this brand is, but this one looks like that. This one and this one look similar. This one is that, I believe. And these dark blue ones are older. So what we need to do is decide which one we can find the most and replicate these shapes in, so we don't have to worry about these different colors. Clearly this one right here is in the minority. So what we'll do is try and get rid of, we'll bring these to the store and we'll see if we can get these replicated later. But definitely the color has to be acceptable, and this is not acceptable. So these colors got to go. We'll copy this in this blue, if we have this blue, and the rest of these I think might be the same. These are closer. That's more acceptable. But definitely these pieces that we cut are wrong. Yeah, there is some difference in here. You can see it right there. So we need to find the blue that works the most. And I don't think that these guys are the same at all either. No, they're not. You can see there's a purple. There's more a purple involved in this one. This is a light blue, but it's closer to being acceptable. So we need to find those right colors. And then we'll cut some more foamies as we need them. You can see that this is all the same color here. All this looks like it's the same color. Well, no, that's not the same color. It's important to have these things because it just looks good on the game table. This looks like, no. Yeah. That'll work. There you can see it. That might be interesting. Is that because of the 2 different sides? Does that look different because of 2 different sides? I'll be darned. The light shows 2 different sides to it. I did not know that. These are actually acceptable for the same color. Yes. Okay, a little bit of learning there. I did not know that. There is a slight color difference in these rivers. So that is an interesting discovery. And I know we've had several videos on this before, the roads and rivers issues. So we will. I wish there was a way to automatically do this, but there isn't. I've got various ideas or capabilities, excuse me, for doing automated configuration of a game table, but putting down roads and rivers is not one of them. That's programming knowledge that I lack. And probably a lot of people do too. So we'll certainly see. Okay, we are continuing to put down our beginnings of the terrain, and as we are in the ancient world of the Roman era, if you will, not quite back as far as the Greeks and Persians, but we're a little bit forward of that and leading up to our work in the medieval era. But we're doing ancients right now, and so we are in the Mediterranean. Well, what does that mean? What it means is there isn't a heck of a lot of forest, and there's not a heck of a lot of bordered fields, as we have said several times. So what we'll do is, let's begin with longer pieces of blue for the rivers. And let's go with, if we divide the table in half, you will see the nuances of doing so. Like this. Imagine what this would do now. The game is being played with the opponent on that side and an opponent on this side. And this river is going to go right down the middle. What does that do? It divides, well, first of all, is the river itself, the creek or whatever, going to be crossable at any point? If yes, then it's just simply a movement barrier. Okay? If it's fordable anywhere, it means it's shallow. And if it's shallow, it means that if men are running away scared, are they going to panic when they get in this water? Not really, because they may already know that it's not very deep. Parts of it might be deep, but generally it's shallow. Well, that would be a little unrealistic for it to be that crossable anywhere. So you have to imagine, we're going to say there are certain portions of it that are crossable and certain portions that are not. Well, do we know where they are? No. Are we going to find out when the need arises? Yeah, unfortunately. When you get to a spot, you roll to see if that is a crossable location. And if it is, then you, are going to mark it so everybody knows? Or do you note it on your own map that that's a crossable location? So, that's a good question. If you wanted to mark this, how do you designate that coordinates? I don't know. We do know that in general, from the judge's sitting position being me, that the top left-hand corner is a whole hex, which begins the pattern of all the hexes. So if that is, as you think of numbering hexes, 1-1, and so on, 1-2, 1-3, 1-4, all the way, just as the old either Avalon Hill or SPI games. How you number these hexes? That would be 1-1. The next column would be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this is the 10th column, and then you could count down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So if this was our hex in question, 10, 10 would be crossable, and then you would note that. Probably on your own roster, because you don't want the opponent to know. Well, if he's watching you do it, okay, he could write it down too. But you might want to say to the opponent, all right, turn around, because I'm going to see if I can get that location. Well, that's kind of stupid, isn't it? Because he just saw you move there. Okay, you got your guys you got here, and you're going to roll to see if you can cross there. Okay, so how else can you do it? You do it beforehand. The judge would do it before, and this scenario would do it beforehand. Okay, yeah, 10-10's a crossing point. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, and so on. Okay, and then you would write that down. Or you would tell potentially one player one thing, and the other player another thing. And only you know, the judge, as to which is the truth. Or be that as difficult as it might be, just ignore that concept, although it might be realistic, and simply leave it up again to a die roll, because that's the most sustainable concept. Without any paperwork, you just roll, die roll. Okay, so like red, it's crossable, and then just mark it and be done. Okay? All right, so now we are going to say that we've got that divided table situation. We don't know where the crossings are. We're going to leave it to the die roll, so we've known those parameters have been established. Everything else seems to be going okay. So we were talking about where to establish crossing points, and now we're going to continue. We've decided this is how we're going to lay out the river. Hills we don't care about yet. We haven't decided that yet. So what about other parts of the creek, river, whatever? Let's try, let's see. I wasn't sure if there's a capability of having a fork. We will see what we can do here for creating a fork somewhere around there, like this. And then we're going to need a shorter piece to finish off. No, I don't like that blue. It's not going to work. Okay. So let's do that. Now you'll notice that this is shooting off on the lines of the hexes, not the flats. So that's an interesting difference that we've had to contend with. In some cases, we want that shooting off to be on the lines of the hexes, which is what this does. Creates shooting down the lines of the hex. Well, that causes a bit of a problem because the hex, the pieces themselves must be cut in such a way that it's a little different than going from flat to flat of a hex. In this case, it looks like either these are cut for corner to corner, or it just so happens that they're working even though they're cut flat to flat in dimensions. So yes, I know that's a complication. You want to avoid that. You decide either you're doing only flat to flat or only corner to corner, and that way this guy would not work. If we're going to have any kind of a fork, it's going to have to obey the cutting, moving, the dividing from side to side, not side to corner, as you can see we're here. That doesn't work. And I don't know where those little pieces are. They should be here, but it looks like we don't have them. We probably have them for the roads, but not for the creek rivers. So we're going to need one. So let's leave this guy out for now, and let's continue with our fork as if it's flat to flat, which is what this is right here. So this is a flat to flat of the hex shape. And then from there, we can take and probably, as you can see, we're going to make a wavy, and now we're going to shoot it off that way. So you see that now becomes quite a deal. Okay, so that's quite an impediment. And if we're let's just put this back. We'll just use this guy for now until we make our new piece. Just in case, I was just curious to see if that would... No, it doesn't work. Okay. So we'll leave this for now. We'll get that other piece cut. So we'll just have to say that that's the way it's going to be, and we'll fix that later. So there is our... actually, we can conform this to the length of the pieces that we have by simply moving it down. As you can see, we had it arranged, and now we're going to change it. To make it conform to the pieces that we have, we just moved it. And if this was a historical battle, then you see how it'd be a little bit of a discrepancy between what was recorded and what actually happened. Or what was recorded and what we've done here. In order to conform, certain things have to give and take. And if you were to record this as an after action and then go to the battlefield and say, hey, wait a minute, whoa, this river's not like that, well, that's the reason. Because when the person recreated the battle, they had to do certain things. That's even true when you drew a map. You'd have to draw it differently for whatever reasons. Maybe something wasn't known, or at the time when it was recorded, the actual battle didn't have accurate information. But the person that then, years and years later, started working on it did. And that's why there would be a discrepancy. But regardless, there is a discrepancy, and that's why those discrepancies occur. Moments in time, information becomes known. All right, so let's do that. Push this down, and now we've got our, okay, and then we take our next piece, which is I think a 3 hex. It is. And then we've got our piece. We've got our creek put in place. So again, there is no rhyme or reason to this. We're just absolutely putting stuff down as we feel like it. And because it's ancient times, there's no roads. Everything is open country. If it is a road, there's no way to know. And unless it's a Roman road, nobody built roads except Rome. So there's trails. Why would trails exist? Because still working? Yeah. All right, so this is not working. Because a path is cut into the road, into the ground by people traveling. Why? Because there's maybe a crossing here, and therefore, if there's a crossing there, the trail of commerce goes over that, and it eventually creates a rut. And why is it certain places and not others? Well, because the ground may be smooth enough for wagons. So they travel, and over the years, it becomes smooth and becomes a road. Because it's been worn, the ground itself has been worn down. That's why it's a road. So, if we know that that is a crossing, the judge will go ahead and say, okay, here's the crossing. That is the crossing. Does the road have to, does the bridge have to be following? Not necessarily. The bridge doesn't have to be exact. It just shows a crossing point is all. You don't have to turn the bridge to be exactly in the direction that it should be, you know, for the crossing. You don't have to show it like that. Maybe the bridge doesn't quite fit, in this case exactly right. It doesn't quite match the cutouts on the bottom of the bridge for the Foamies. So there it is right there. That's your crossing point. And are the hills in position? Well, if we did just use the randomness of this and put them like that, and this one would be match the sides of the hexagons. Like that. And that's what it would look like. That's too close. So we'll move this guy way over here. Okay? This guy we will simply put way up here. And this guy we will put like that. Now, there we go. That is our high level, our undulating terrain. And then we'll put it in our trees. Okay, so we have been talking about how to establish the beginnings of the game, and we've just randomly placed force onto our terrain, having decided that the crossing point was going to be here, and we kind of determined with this little fork here that the river was going to branch off, and we made some more of these in case we wanted to vary the terrain. But in this case, it looks like it's going to work out okay. And then we just randomly threw up in the air these little pieces of foam tree, and wherever they landed in the middle is where we just kind of guessed that's a good enough spot, and that's it. And then we placed a corner unit, a corner bunch of trees, and that block right there of trees. And we understand if the players are going to be approaching each other from this way, then that presents some elements. Maybe there's going to be some difficulty there because of that terrain. Benefit and penalty as well. And then for the other player coming from this direction, we don't know where the crossings are. So again, instead of committing or waiting for the whole force to determine, you can go ahead and just use a skirmisher units. If he's got skirmishers, generally they do. And what they'll do is by moving the first turn, for instance, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that skirmisher unit gets there, this one gets there, this one gets here. And of course, the player may have more than 3, but each one of these can check on their facing arc. So there's 1, 2, 3 right there that he can check. He die rolls to see which one, if any. For instance, you roll to see if there was a crossing, and then you would roll to see which of the hexes would be the crossing. Same here. You roll to see if a crossing is found, and then which of the 2 hexes, and the same here. And as I was detailing earlier, if there's a failure and you don't find any, well, then the truth of the matter is you have to move away from those 2 that you checked to the next 2, or the ones that haven't been checked, which means that one right there. So this guy would move here if he failed, and this guy would move up there or here next turn to see if they can be successful. So that's how you would determine where the crossing points are. And if you wanted to mark it, you could just leave the skirmisher there. They're the guys that are going to be guiding the rest of the army to get across, or that is the crossing point. Or, in fact, consider this, that if these 2 guys found a crossing and this guy was right here and they found a crossing, perhaps both of these locations would be crossings, and they're right next to each other. You would roll to see if that is crossable, that is crossable, that is crossable, and that is crossable. And if they all come up crossable, then there you are. A large swath of that creek is crossable by a whole force. They could be deployed and then move across and deployed. Now, there's also the possibility that the game cards might dictate, hey, you've got your troops all lined up. Instead of crossing at a certain point, a game card may say, guess what? You magically get across that thing. And that's a helpful card because it's very unexpected. And whereas the opponent might see you behind there and go, well, okay, he's sitting back there, then you could spring that card and immediately move all those troops across, and the other player wouldn't know it until you did it. So he might be coming at you for a series of turns, thinking you're behind there, and all of a sudden you play that card, boom, everybody's across the river. Which would imply, obviously, that it's crossable for the whole length of that force, obviously. So that is how you would be able to determine crossing points and the location of the force and so on. And I guess with that, we're kind of ready to place our units and continue with establishing the parameters of the rest of the scenario. Like, for instance, how many game cards each player has, what those game cards might be. It might be that a game card comes up that says you can take 1 bit of information from the opponent that's been hidden, something you didn't know that was written down earlier by the other player, and then that player would have to give up that information. So that's just an example of a card or a random event that might happen. These are the kinds of things that are important to do, and it sounds like a lot, but it kind of is. But once you get that stuff understood, it makes it accurate in that there are a lot of unknowns, and yet, just as in real life, The commanders couldn't know everything. They couldn't see everything, and they couldn't know everything. But the game cards, the random events, and those kinds of things, if they're kept to a minimum, generally we only allow each player to have 3 cards, which is essentially 3 elements of random event, and that's it. Now, they will be able to get more as the game progresses. There may be something that happens that allows them to get another card, but until then, they each have about 3. Now, that's obviously an algorithm. The better the commander, the more cards they would have. So an average commander would have, say, 2. A good commander has 3 cards, and an excellent commander would have 4 cards to draw. And in our case, we don't use physical cards anymore. Software has thankfully come along that allows us to create our own cards online. So that's where we're at right now, and we can begin to finalize our Ancients troops and start putting them in position.